All right, first up today, we're going to be looking at the Machinewise Serif, which is pretty great. It's titanium handles, it's an S35V in steel blade, it's a Chanwich design, and it's got a pretty good sound. Sorry for any rough flipping or rough footage in there. I am trying out a new camera setup, which is a little bit harder to film with, but it's a little bit more stable for actual video. Especially when I'm trying to do first-person footage like this. Machinewise really made something pretty cool here. And this one has been an absolute, whoop, the hardest trick in the book right there. This has been an absolute blast to play with. It's a really great knife, and obviously later in the video I'll be diving into my thoughts in quite a bit more detail. Next up, we'll be looking at a Squid Industries Tsunami, the Production 5 model. This one has Damascus handles, which is not the standard, but for the purpose of reviewing and flipping, the only difference between this and a standard is that these Damascus handles don't have the texturing on them. As you can tell, it's got a dramatically different sound profile than the Serif, but also dramatically improved from the Production 2 Tsunami that I used to have. It just sounds a little bit more refined, less cheap. The sound really matches the knife now, I would say. Hi, I'm Marcus. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we are taking a look at two knives that are very similar and very different at the same time. The Machinewise Serif, currently regarded as one of the best knives on the market, and the Squid Industries flagship product, the Tsunami. This is a Production 5 model, so the latest and greatest iteration, which has massively improved over Production 1, which was, I think, about a year ago at this point. So right off the bat, they're both S35V in steel blades, they're both titanium handles, and they're both Chanwich design, channel sandwich design, with adjustable weight pin systems. So, right, very similar. The Serif is a smidge longer than the Tsunami, as you can see here. just a little taller, just a little longer. Holding up side by side, you can see. The blade length isn't really too different. It's all in the handles. The handles are what makes up the big difference here. Similar weights, the Tsunami is just a bit lighter, which makes sense given that it's a slightly smaller knife. They're both on bushings, which is obviously kind of the de facto go-to best pivot system there is. Bushings are just a buttery smooth flipping experience, phenomenally tuned. As you can see, there's very little play in this, just the smallest amount. And this Tsunami has literally, and that is me forcing it right there. That is the most I can get out of it. It is so tightly tuned. It is absolutely amazing. And obviously, you know, here it is. Just another view of it with some greasy fingerprints on the Damascus, which really is disheartening, and some oil spilling out of the pivot, which we'll go ahead and wipe off right now. S35 being steel blade on both, bushings on both. The weight systems are different. The brass weights that come with the Serif are in this little box here. I have to pry one out now because I wasn't thinking about doing this earlier, but as you can see, they've got the little brass weights which go right in the handles when you deconstruct it, whereas the Tsunami has much smaller pins, which you can see in my first video that I made about balisongs. They're smaller little pins that go into little grooves in the handle once you take it apart. Both systems are fine. The Tsunami's improved now that the pivots are all the same. The screws down here and up here are all the same type, so you don't have to keep quite as close track of it. Both are a really tight fit to get the weights in there, but they don't rattle, they don't make any noise, which is really, really convenient. That said, I think really the Koenig has done one of the best jobs with modular weight pin systems, which is it's a full channel knife, and it has a little screw, and you just change that weight out there. It's a little bit of a pain, regardless of anything, having to completely deconstruct your knife to change the weights around. That's just my opinion. I think it's a really great feature. I think it's really nice that you can do that. It really does add a lot of customizability, and it really helps you kind of create the perfect feel for your knife. But it's a little bit of a hassle, if we're being completely honest, regardless of anything, because you have to completely take the knife apart, put the pieces in, put it back together, and it's not the hardest thing in the world to do by any means, but it's just a little bit inconvenient. You really can't do it on the fly. You have to kind of go home, sit down at your desk, make sure you've got a clean workspace, get everything set up, and take care of it, and then put it back together. But it's a great feature to have. So overall, I'm kind of ambivalent towards it. It doesn't really negatively sway me one way or the other. But that's a little bit of a tangent. Back to what we're really talking about, which is the similarities and differences between these two knives. This Damascus Tsunami, as you can see, does not have any of the texturing that my old one did, or that most standard titanium ones have. It's just got the whole pattern. So it's a little bit slicker, it's a little bit smoother. I think with the Damascus, it's a better look, but it provides less grip than the standard Tsunami. Whereas the standard Tsunami has a really, really nicely milled machined pattern on there that's really similar to what you'd see on the blade here. These really fine, I don't know if I'll be able to capture on camera, these really fine little just grooves along it that add so much texture, which is really phenomenal. And obviously on the blade, you can see, I really did a bad job with that. That is so much lube in those pivots. The NRB thick really comes out a lot faster than I would have expected, but it is really great and smells pretty good. So NRB thick juice, it's pretty solid. So anyways, here we go. Production 5, number 215, Squid Industries on this side. You can kind of see the blade texture a little bit in there. This is the S35 VN steel blade. Compared to the old Damascus one that I had, I actually really prefer just the standard steel. It's much crisper, it's sharper, you can really appreciate the details a lot more. And S35 VN is a great upgrade from what it originally was, which I think these were, 154 CPM maybe? I don't know. I prefer the S35VN, which is one of the gripes I had earlier with the Tsunami, was that they seemed to change something every single iteration. But between 4 and 5, they had no real changes. It also has the jeweling inside the handles, which might be a little hard to get on camera, which is nice. It's a really nice little feature. It doesn't change the performance of the knife at all, but it really kind of just adds this premium feel to it. It has a nice look to it, even with the Damascus, making it a little harder to make out the patterning. And it just has a very premium feel. Still has the jimping on the sides of the handles, which is a great feature. And the sound profile was massively improved from production 1 and 2 to 3 and onwards. And so it has a much better sound than it used to have. I really do appreciate that Squid Industries took that kind of critique into effect and found a way to make the knife just better sounding. It's not amazing sounding, it's not the best sounding knife, but it's at least pleasant, and the sound really matches the aesthetic, it matches the look, it feels more premium than in older models, which is really great. Meanwhile, and obviously, I don't want to rehash everything I said in the first Tsunami video, but the overall design of the knife is really nice. It's simple, it's clean, but also kind of futuristic and high-tech looking. It fits with Squid Industries' aesthetics for all their other knives. It's a really nice look, in my opinion. Some people think it's a little simple and plain for being what it is, but I really appreciate that it's not trying hard to be 1,000 different things. It's a clean, simple design. I really like that. Meanwhile, the Machinewise Serif has a crazy loud sound profile. By comparison to the Tsunami, it's absolutely deafening, which sometimes I really like and sometimes I'm not a huge fan of it. It's got the same jimping on the handles, but it also has it along the inner side as well, which is pretty nice. No hole pattern, which is not normally my thing. I really do prefer hole patterns, but the pattern that's machined in there is pretty nice looking, and it adds a really good amount of grip. It really does feel nice. And then most of the blades have this stone wash finish, with a few having a bead blast finish, which is much less common. There's a wide variety of anodizations. This one's just a blue one. I really was trying to get a hold of one of the two-tone finishes where the crevices are a different shade than the raised surfaces. I think those look really great, but I had no luck with that. So here we are with this stock blue, which I think is better looking than the raw titanium. Something about the raw titanium just doesn't do it for me aesthetically with the Serif. But overall, I think the stonewash blade is really nice. It doesn't show any sort of marking very easily. It kind of hides dings, it hides any damage. That said, this one's in perfect condition. It is absolutely razor sharp with a nice pokey little nose. Unlike the Tsunami, which, like most Squid Industries knives, is not particularly sharp. And I understand why. Just putting that one back in the box. These are apparently getting updated and now will come with additional hardware, which is pretty nice. That's my biggest gripe that I have with the Tsunami and most of Squid Industries knives is they are just not particularly sharp. And I understand, you know, certain makers like Julian of JK Design will mostly make their knives with what he calls a flipper's edge, and Squid Industries, I imagine, does something similar where they have a flipper's edge. It'll still cut you. You know, I messed up and you can't really tell along the line of my wrinkles there on my knuckles, but there's a little cut, so it's not like you can't get cut with it. It's still a knife, but it's nowhere near as razor sharp as something like my Monarch or the Pluto or the Serif even, which just came out being razor sharp. They're knives, you know, they should be sharp in my opinion. And the Tsunami's just not. It's not dull, it's just not razor sharp, which is really fine. It's not that big of a deal, but it is one of those like little pet peeves that I have with it, which is where I would say the Tsunami kind of falls behind the Serif. As well as the packaging. They haven't even updated to the new boxes yet. The new Squid boxes have these nice little pull tabs, whereas the Tsunami still comes in white box with the foam and the card, which again it's a nice look, but it's not quite as nice feeling as the 3D printed Serif boxes, which I think are really nice, and they're only getting nicer. It's just a good little quality of life feature. It holds all the pins, it holds all the extra hardware. It's a really good feature. In terms of flipping performance, both knives I think perform really well. They both are super fluid, super smooth, really lightweight and agile, which I really appreciate. In my opinion, I think I prefer the Tsunami's flipping style a little bit more. It's just a little long in the Serif. It's kind of a similar issue I had with the Telesto, where it's too long. For my personal preferences, most of the time. The Telesto was far too long, and I'll probably be making a video about that at some point, but the Serif is only occasionally too long feeling, but it's balanced really nicely, so I don't typically notice that, whereas the Tsunami I think has a much better balance point that I really prefer. So overall, they're really similar. The price points are right about the same level. Squid Industries is apparently ramping up production of the Tsunami, so they'll be a little bit easier to get a hold of and no longer be more or less exclusive to Blade Show, which is a really, really nice change of production. Apparently it took a really long time to get the machining process dialed in, whereas the Serif is currently massively in production. It's had no slowdown of anything, and Machinewise has been able to absolutely crank them out. But there are apparently just tons and tons of people on the wait list, so both of these are at a point where they're relatively hard to get, and hopefully we'll see that changing pretty soon. So really, both these knives, if you can have one or the other, it really comes down to personal preference. They're both great additions to a collection. I personally prefer the Tsunami, and not just because it's got the Damascus handles, which I really love the look of. Just in terms of feel, aesthetics, general kind of workmanship in there, I think the Tsunami is just a little bit higher quality, which is not to say that the Serif isn't. The Serif is really phenomenally well made, and is a blast to flip. I just, personal preference, I think my Tsunami is what I prefer. I think it's a better feel, and I'm not going to make the mistake of letting this one go like I did with my last one, because they are so fun and light and easy to flip that it's hard for anything else to really compare in terms of just general raw flipping performance. That said, the Serif is, again, amazing, and it really does boil down to personal preference. One isn't necessarily better than the other, I would say. But there you go. That's both knives. They're both really phenomenal, and that's kind of just a little breakdown of the differences between the two. And I hate saying it, but one is not better than the other. It really does boil down to personal preference. If you can get your hands on either one, I highly recommend trying both out before going, oh, I hate the Serif, I love the Tsunami, or oh, the Tsunami's the worst, I love the Serif. They're both phenomenal. If you can get both in your collection, I'd highly recommend that. And if you can't, try them both out and just pick the one you like more, because that's really what it boils down to with these two, is preference, because they're in the same general price range. They're in the same general style range. They're just so similar with a lot of things that it really comes down to the differences in what you like more. And again, they're both phenomenal knives, and I really, really do enjoy both of these tremendously. If the Tsunami was just sharper, it would probably be the clear winner in my eyes instead of being up for mental debate. But there you have it. Thanks for checking this out. We've got more content coming eventually. I don't want to make any firm promises because I sometimes just don't make things that I say I'm going to make, like the Sentinel, Slifty, and what was the other one? Medusa comparison video, right? Never got around to that. So I don't want to make any firm promises on what is coming next, but there will be more stuff coming soon. And that's going to be it. Have a great day.